All right. So first, I want to say thank you for joining me tonight, bud. I really appreciate it. But this is going to be like a kind of a weird combo. Maybe not for everybody out there, but it's a conversation I kind of wanted to have with somebody at some point because it's it's got me feeling a little way. And about a month ago, you put out a video about your personal reasons for collecting and sometimes how it feels a void in your life. And I can't tell you how many times I've thought about that for myself, but also other collectors from what I've seen. So thank you for joining me because this could be a little bit of a touchy subject.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I appreciate, on the video itself, you had a comment that, a lot of people upvoted as well. So I'm glad that we were able to kind of get together and, you know, see where the convo takes us.
Yeah, I mean it's like I said, some people may not want to talk about something like this, but I think it's kind of important because especially for me, like I grew up a certain way and I'll tell this story, later on as we get into the conversation. Like, sometimes characters affect you in a certain way about reading a comic or the way you grew up or if something happens in your life, just like the comic characters themselves. And I just feel like it's a really important topic that we need to have because I think a lot of people kind of keep it to themselves and they don't always talk about it. And sometimes I think they do that on purpose. Like I know sometimes I don't like talking about certain things, so I figure why not? Because I like listening to podcasts and hear about emotional and personal stuff, and I think it's great because I can relate to a lot of that stuff. What about you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's funny because I'll consume a lot of comic book content, but like outside of comic book content stuff, I basically at this point just listen to podcasts and very into like mindfulness and all of this stuff. So I think it bleeds over every now and again. I know that the people who watch my channel really just want to, focus on the comic content stuff. But I was feeling a certain way that day, and so I was like, oh, you know what? Let me mix this up and talk about these types of subjects. And it felt like it connected anyways because in the culture of comics, there was a lot of like, blind bag talk and courtyard IO and all this stuff. And I feel two ways about the whole thing. Like on the one hand, like it's all good. Like whatever people want to make, just make these products. But like the consumerism aspect to it all was something that I think is a little bit like the elephant in the room to it all, and that's
Yeah,
kind of where
yeah,
the conversation lent itself to at least being somewhat relevant or timely, at least for me.
yeah. We're gonna get into that as well, but I want to start off talking about like why do people in general collect? Do you think? I mean, I know me personally, I collect because it does fill a void in my life. I mean, there's no secret here. Like I've said this before, I am not a huge fan of what I do personally for work. It's not something that I enjoy. I got into it because a family member of mine also does it. So it was like they kind of said to me, you know what? At least if you do this, you kind of have an in the career. And I out of high school, I'm like, all right, I'll do that because I didn't really know what the hell I wanted to do. So for me, having that not so great career kind of led me to other things as I got older. Now, I was always a comic book collector as a kid, or as a reader, I should say. I was fascinated by the art. I was always fascinated by certain stories. And there's a reason why I follow main two characters, and I'll talk about that later. But why do you think it is that people collect outside of that void? Or if we are talking about the void, I would say go a little further.
I mean, I think that there's probably like really good, psychological papers that have been written about these types of things, but I'll just kind of shoot from the hip and say what it is for me. At least I believe people collect because one, on its surface, people think that it's fun, like they just enjoy having sort of an escapist hobby. Maybe they sort of grew up with comic books and it's them getting back in touch with their nostalgia. I mean, but I guess even broader than comic books, everybody sort of has their muses or whatever things that they like to collect. But I think a lot of it is, fun, nostalgia, reconnecting with happier times or memories or childhood things that they really enjoyed. I think a lot of it too is, now when you're in your adulthood and you have like some more money that you can spend, like you can buy some of the cool toys that we all like and expensive things that we like to have, and it brings us joy, and then there's probably other components about it too. Like maybe there's just habitual things that people like about it, like the collecting itself. Like if there's probably people out there that just really find it satisfying to get like 1 through 100 of whatever, So there's many different reasons. I mean, for me, I think I really just enjoy. It's definitely the habitual nature of taking me back to when I was a kid, collecting with my dad and my brother and stuff like that. So I enjoy just the lifestyle of like going to comic stores and going to shows and feeling those feelings because I enjoy all the characters as well. And then I think the hunt. I've fallen in love with the hunt as well. Just finding the good deal and whatever dopamine hit that comes with that. So that's kind of where I'm at. With it as far as like my interest in it, and of course all the other things. Yeah, that's been my sort of background, or at least why I at least continue to do it. Also for the YouTube channel, can't stop now. We're forever on a treadmill, Lawrence. We have to like keep making
Yeah,
content. So like we have to keep getting new comic books. So self
that
fulfilling at that
that
point.
100%, 100%. You touched on a lot of things there that I want to talk about. One is nostalgia because that's the biggest thing for me as an adult collector, and I think a lot of people out there like they remember that great time in their life growing up as a kid or as a young adult, whether it be collecting comics or toys. It could be coins for a lot of people collect coins, they collect stamps, they collect anything. People collect rocks for God's sake, but that nostalgia factor is a big thing. Like I do a lot of other stuff here on the channel, not just comics. I do arcade stuff because that was a big part of my life growing up, as a kid. And it brings me happiness because of that nostalgia I still feel towards some of those games or comics likewise. So, I mean, that's a huge part in adult collecting as well. But another thing you talked about is we talked about the void, but I also when you said about you like going to comic shops, you like that lifestyle of being on the hunt, looking for things. I think it gives a lot of people things to do, myself included. I don't do much on the weekend. Like I like to just hang out. So if I'm like have nothing going on, it's a lot on a Saturday. I'll go over to my LCS just to kind of hang out, look around, see what they have, and I enjoy it. It gives me something to look forward to on the weekends when I'm not working and doing that stuff. And I wonder how much of that plays a part in it as well. It gives people something to do.
I think it's a huge part. Like I think like it's kind of cliche to talk about like community and all this stuff and the comic book community and all that, but I think it's real. I think it's absolutely real. At least I can say that is for me. Like just having like that purpose and community and people to kind of connect with, even if it's not like very deep. Even if it's just somebody who is like knows their person that works at their local comic store, and they just go there, and at least you have a somewhat familiar face every Wednesday that you bump into, and you have a little chit chat, and you talk about, oh, what do you think of Fantastic Four? Just having that little interaction, especially now, because like we're constantly in this digital world and everything. People are ironically getting less connected, in the physical space as more people go online, and so I sort of feel like comic books is like, at least for me, a really good hobby that like gets me out. Like you said, like
Yeah.
I need reasons to get out of the house more than ever. I mean, I love going to dinners and like seeing friends and stuff, but like how many times can you do that? Like, so you need like other little hobbies and things to get you to interact with people. So I love it for that aspect. And I think a lot of people probably enjoy that part of it and get some fulfillment or purpose out of that. But that's my guess. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I remember when I actually had a comic shop right in my town, and I live in a small town, so like it was wild. I would go there at least twice a week just to kind of hang out and talk. It gave me something to do, to talk to people who had, like-minded thoughts and they enjoyed the same things. So I never grew up like that. We're getting to me growing up later, but like I always found that fascinating. I always really, really enjoyed that. And now, like ever since, COVID, I hate to say it, but 2020 with YouTube exploding, at least for me, and I think a lot of comic collectors, that became a bigger thing where I would start talking to people on Instagram. I would start talking to people through YouTube, like all over, even Twitter to an extent. Like so, like the community has grown so much to where it's not just like, oh, I'm going to collect comics because I have something to do, but I also have this community now of all these people that I know just because we like to collect the same things or talk about the same things. I mean, me and you would have never spoken if it wasn't for YouTube and comics. And I think probably I would say even COVID at this point.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think it's so the amount of people that I've met in my life through comic books has made the entire process worth it. Like I always say, like that's the best part about having a YouTube channel is that I get to like talk to other people in different walks of life and make connections with people and friendships and all that. And so it's it's been a great perk of the whole thing. And I don't know try to take my like YouTube sense out of it because I don't know if everybody who collects, is doing content or social media stuff. But even that aside, I still think the lifestyle of it um, is one of the benefits of like just doing it in
Mhm.
the first place and having those connections.
How do people around you that are not into comic books take to you being a collector? Because is that something you have people around you? I gotta assume you do. That what do they think of you and the hobby?
Well, a lot of people in my friends outside of my comic books, like they're just they don't know anything about it. I mean, a lot of them understand me and my interests, so maybe it doesn't surprise them that I like this stuff, but at the same time, like, yeah, like it's hard to connect with people. I think that they think it's cool. Like they all know the superhero characters, and they'll be like, "Oh, that's cool. You have like this comic book." When I start to explain to them what it is, but yeah, I think it's probably true for a lot of people. You don't have a lot of people in your real life that are probably as into the specific hobby that you're into as like you would expect. I mean, or not even
Yeah,
expect. Like there's just not that
yeah.
many people that are likely going to be into it. So that's where you have to find people, within the YouTube space or other avenues.
And that's wild, right? Because I mean, it feels like that's a lot. Because I'm the same way. I don't have a lot of friends that I grew up with or into comic books or superheroes stuff like that. So it's wild that we've gravitated to this. I don't want to say other lifestyle, but something else, and none of our close friends or personal friends around us do the same thing outside of the people we've met through the hobby. I just think that's crazy.
I have had a couple of people who have organically now discovered my YouTube channel that I know in real life who are like,
Ah,
yo,
ah.
like I didn't know you like comic books or did this or whatever. And so it's kind of funny. And then we've now become closer friends,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
due to that fact. So that's kind of been a funny, thing that's happened to me over time. I'm sure maybe you've had some a similar experience.
I got a good story because this happened maybe about a month ago. So I used to coach football, and one of my kids that I coach, I'm closer with his dad and his mom, and literally he's sitting down on his couch. He's telling me, and he was telling my wife actually that he was sitting down. He's watching YouTube, and he's watching. She's like all excited. The Masters Universe movie's coming out, and he's so high, he's so happy. And he goes and he's on YouTube and he's watching this thing. He's like, oh, this guy's great. This guy's great. And he's like, oh man, this kind of looks like Lawrence. He shows his wife. He's like, that does look like Lawrence. All of a sudden, his wife texts my wife, and my wife's like, oh yeah, that's him. He's got a YouTube channel. He talks about comics. He talks about. He's like, get out of here. Starts going nuts. I see him like, oh, I didn't know you do this. I didn't know you do that. I'm like, oh my god, I don't really like anybody I know knowing anything about this because it's such a weird element because my personal life is so much different than what you see here because of all the other things that I'm into and stuff. It's just wild to see that.
Yeah, yeah. That's definitely very like, I don't want to bore anybody who's listening with like, YouTube or social media things, but it is such an interesting aspect to it, like have to juggle like sort of like two lives. Cause like in here, it's like
Yeah,
I'm Swagglehaus and everybody knows me as that. But like outside, I have my whole other life and social circles and all that. And so it was a little bit like strange for me to have this persona and then have it intersect with people who I really know and me just being like, I wonder what they think about this. But for the most part, I think at this point they think it's cool. And I mean, maybe at the start of COVID, it was like stranger, but now, 2025, like everybody has some sort
yeah.
of YouTube social media thing that they're doing.
I think a lot of people though they're maybe a little bit. I don't want to say ashamed of. I mean, if someone may look at me and be like, "Oh, like maybe he's a little bit ashamed of all the shit that they see in this room," but I'm not. I don't give a shit. I'm 47 years old for God's sake. I spent my whole life like idolizing certain things and enjoying parts of my life that I just want to enjoy again now as an adult. And that's what I think the biggest thing with collecting, especially as an adult collector, is that nostalgia factor, the void in their life. I'm going to go first here about sharing my personal experience with comics and growing up because it's something I've never shared on air and it doesn't bother me because it's made me who I am today. But I grew up, alone. Like my parents are divorced when I was really, really young, like 1 years old or less. And I lived with my dad, and my dad worked all the time. I would get up, he'd be gone, and I would go to bed, and he'd be just getting home. So like, he was never around. It's not for not caring or anything. My dad's a great guy, but he just worked a ton. He's always worked, and he's still working now at 72 years old. He works freaking 10-hour days, which is crazy. But I grew up doing everything for myself and not having a lot of people around. And I always gravitated to two characters, especially that kind of went through a loss in Spider-Man and Batman. And they're not the same. Don't get me wrong, but like parents dying is something totally different than being alone. But when you grow up alone or you don't have, I don't want to say I don't have many friends because I had a ton of friends, but I was never able to do anything because I had no one around to take care of me, to take me
Yeah.
places, right? So it was like I felt like Spider-Man and Batman, they were my friends, they were going through the same things that I were going through. So I would always gravitate to reading those comics to see what they could accomplish, to see what they were doing next, because I felt like I wasn't able to do certain things. And I was just so blown away by their stories. And every time, like I still get emotional when I go to a Batman movie or not too campy Spider-Man movie about, what this kid or this adult has gone through, and then able to do, it's because of the choices they've made. And me knowing who I am, I've made some awful choices. Don't get me wrong, we all make mistakes, but having those characters there as a backbone for me really got me through um to becoming an adult, because there was a time where I almost went down the wrong road and it was not good. Thank God my dad recognized that and moved me to a different town and kind of got me situated. He got married, and it was it was harder in certain aspects, but it was easier in certain aspects. But I don't think I would be where I am today not knowing what I knew about comics, about those characters, about doing things for yourselves and working through things and making good choices on who you become. Um, and it's just something I'm really proud of myself for where I am. But I'll also share this in that, like, because of that, because of I was alone, because I raised myself, because I would never really had anyone around. Like, I was single for a really long time. Not saying I wasn't active, because I was, but I didn't get married till I was 39 years old, and that's because I met my wife, and I had known her when I was a lot younger, but she had two boys, and their father passed away when they were kids, and I think that plays a role in it, because while my parents were still there, I didn't have a great relationship with them, and they weren't around that much. So like me being there and me being a part of their lives, like made me get back into comics as well, because my youngest was a big superhero fan. So like that's what made me go start buying books again. That's what made me start doing all this stuff again. And then of course the YouTube thing hits and then goes from there. But everybody has their own journey, and I wanted to share mine. So if anybody out there is going through something, whether it be loneliness, divorce, because I know home life is another thing that's really, really hard as an adult. Trust me, getting married at nearly 40, it is really fucking hard. So it's especially doing everything for yourself forever and then having someone else to come in and take care of and then take care of you. It's just a different lifestyle. So everyone out there listening to this, I know what you're going through. I know what you've been through. And I know these things that we collect, they have meaning. So that's really, really what I wanted to share.
Yeah. Yeah. No, thanks for that. I mean, that's the power, the power of like the 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 superheroes that we read and like the inspiration that it comes, because it's like, even though it's like, you know, the Silver Surfer is punching Galactus, we impress upon that conflict, like whatever else is the conflict in our lives, like just, having to overcome hardships in our lives. And like, wow, Silver Surfer can punch Galactus in the face. Maybe I can, I don't know, get my life together or whatever the difficulty thing is. And it's like, it sounds, so trivial, but it's really not. And like, that's why I think that's why it's so resonant, and that's why it's so satisfying too. When like you watch like a good superhero movie or something like that, that deals with themes that you can project your own sort of personal hoods, onto it. And,
Mm.
yeah, I think that's why we love it. And so it's cool that you got that, from your own situation out of the characters that you read and
Yeah.
let it lead to a good thing or found it inspiring in some manner. So yeah.
I in a lot of ways, it just I think it makes you forget things as well. Like if you've gone through something, it kind of like gets you out of that and puts you in another world where it's a little bit easier, it's a little bit more accepting, it's a little bit, you know, fair for you. I'll put it that way. So you recently released a video a couple of months ago or a month ago about, the void that you feel sometimes, and how collecting kind of fills that void. Can you elaborate on that a little bit without going, you know, taking it too far where you're comfortable?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess I can quickly kind of summarize the video that I did. Again, it sort of came from this, the a lot of the conversations in the collecting world and how many kind of gambling and commercial or consumerism that has been coming out of it. And so I kind of wanted to share a little bit of a story of like how I sort of got back into comic books and where I was kind of, going into that void and that numbness. But basically, my I grew up collecting with my dad and my brother. Like a lot of people, you get in and out of it over the years. And then later in my life, like kind of got more interested, at least in terms of like the content and stuff and reading and all that, but not really collecting. My brother passed away in 2018. He took his own life. And that was like really one of the big catalysts for me, kind of pulling out the old books and having those memories and, going through his old comics and his collection. And then I sort of found myself like, connecting to this and chasing that kind of nostalgia and connection with him through it. And then I would like go into comic book stores from that point and fill out his run. This is the stuff I share in the video. I'd fill out his run, and eventually I filled his run. I just found myself needing to still go through comic books and go to comic book stores and sort of fill that. And I could tell that it was just like, a pain that I had for, grieving for my brother that was me going to the comic book store and sort of needing to fill this numbness. And it's not that it was like a terrible problem, like I was a hoarder and I just kept was buying everything, but I just found myself, needing to go to these stores and just like like gloss over or numb the kind of the stuff that I was going through and just find some temporary kind of escapism and just sort of buy stuff. And I kind of found myself doing that. And then it kind of just made me think about like other people in the hobby. And I've heard stories, like or maybe we all know certain collectors that just maybe go a little overboard on stuff, to put it lightly, or they really make some questionable purchases. And I sort of just posed the question and often wondered, like, I mean, there's got to be a lot of people that go through this, not specifically what I went through, but like whatever it is, trying to fill that void or numb that pain that they got going on in their life. And it just sort of made me wonder, especially, even when you tie it to like the gambling aspects and like the explosion of, gambling culture that exists kind of in collectibles, but also even outside of that. So that was kind of the premise of it. And I found myself in it for a bit, but after a while, gaining perspective and doing my YouTube and being able to eventually spin myself out of it to where now I have like a what I think is a very healthy relationship with my collecting. But I wanted to make that video to sort of bring it up as like a piece of a conversation to see, if other people connected with it. So that was kind of the story
Well,
behind that.
obviously it did because it got me thinking and I really thought about it and it's made me want to get you on to kind of talk about it. And we had a very small conversation about, kind of what we could talk about, regarding this topic. But do you mind me asking, like, what was your brother collecting? What was he into as far as comics?
Yeah, yeah, he was a Wolverine guy, so he was a little older than me, but I'll age myself. We came into comics around off the Tim Burton Batman, so like 89, 90, 91. Right in that boom period. And that was when like Wolverine was like the biggest character, the Buscema run. So he was collecting that. I was into Silver Surfer and Darkhawk, as people who watch my channel know. So he was just the biggest Wolverine collector, so that was his whole thing. And even up through later in life. I mean, even if we didn't collect, we always watched the superhero movies and always talked about it. And so he was always an X-Men guy, like a Hugh Jackman guy and all that. So he loved that stuff.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So what run did you finish for him?
He had his Buscema run, the
Okay.
Wolverine. If you guys know that particular run that came out, the first solo series that he did. So he had like, one to whatever 50 or so, but I know, there's a couple in there that were missing, like a very random filler issue. So I started with that and just kind of we'd go to the store and finish it out and find the ones that he was missing.
Do you think that how do I say this? Did it help you at all finishing that run? You know what I mean? Like, did it feel like of a sense of like, I don't want to say relief, but it is a coping. I hate to say it, but comic collecting, any type of collecting in general, is a coping mechanism at certain points where it kind of helps you. Like I did that a little bit with my Amazing Spider-Man run, where it's like having a goal really kind of sets you on a straightened path, where it kind of focuses your mind, where you're not really trying to think about or worry about anything else. Did it give you any type of relief or anything like that?
Yeah, it did. It did. It was nice to do it. I mean, like it made me feel, connected to him in a way. And I still have his run. And I've mentioned before, it's like those are my favorite comic books. Everything else is for sale. Those would be the ones that never leave my hands. So that's been, fun to do and find that with him. And if anything, it was like I said, like as soon as I finished, that was when it was like, now what? And that was when all right, let me just randomly buy X Factor comic books, which no disrespect to X Factor, but it was just like, all right, I'm just gonna buy this stuff. Um,
Yeah.
so that was but it was a joy to do it, and I had a lot of fun, and definitely felt connected to him, or felt a little bit of healing in that. Although I think the more of the healing stuff really comes from the plant medicine and the therapy, and after all that stuff. That's the
Yeah.
real stuff. But the comic stuff is good too.
Something like that, it'll stay with you forever. It'll stay with you
Yeah.
forever. But like I said, when you put out the video, man, you accomplished a lot of things, and you're kind of like, I don't wanna say, I think Manu is the caretaker to the community, but you're like the guy that's kinda the information guy, and you kinda, I don't wanna say you put the community on your back at times with all the information you give and everything you put out there. And I said it on the comment on your video. I think he would be incredibly proud of where you've gotten this community to be, because I don't think a lot of the stuff that goes on right now and the information that comes out, it's due to a lot of the people who put out YouTube content, and you're right at the forefront of that. One last question about your brother, if you don't mind. What do you think he would say to you right now about this whole the comic thing, and where you've gotten yourself with it?
Oh, man, I think that he would. I think he'd think it was awesome. I think I think for sure he would have gotten back into comic book collecting, like during COVID, like when we all kind of really took it to the nth degree. Um, so it's sad to me that he didn't get to ride this wave. Maybe it's a good thing, you didn't have to pay those COVID prices. But I think that he would have really enjoyed it, and I think he would have really enjoyed um, what I've done with the YouTube. And I definitely think like, yeah, like for sure he would have been the type of person to be like, dude, we got to go to San Diego Comic Con. Like we got to
Yeah.
go, we got to do all these things. So yeah, he definitely, was the type of person that would want to go to like San Diego Comic Con, and we'd be doing all this stuff. But I know that ultimately, through some woo 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 force, he's living vicariously through me, or I kind of keep his spirit alive and talk about it and everything. And what's the saying that's you always you die twice, right? It's the time that you die, and then the time that the last person who says your name. So for me, it's like it's sort of my duty to kind of keep him involved in some way. And so he's part of my story and part of my YouTube. And so, until
And
until my YouTube keeps going, he's going to be part of it.
if you'd like to become a sponsor here on the Mighty Rewind podcast, make sure you reach out at the Mighty Rewind podcast at gmail.com.